welcome to the Paranormal Pride. I'm your host, Denise Pridemore, and my special co-host, Ron, is here.
Special?
Yeah, you're special.
Oh, thank you.
Maybe short bus special, but he's special.
Yep.
So yeah, we just came back from my nephew's funeral, and we decided to have a show since we hadn't had one except for the last week. So we wanted to make sure that we kept this going. So hopefully everybody who's here is good, feeling great, all that good stuff. And we are going to get started because I don't see any sense in waiting. So our guest tonight is Nick Moulet from Things of Illinois and also of the Things Network. And he's got multiple podcasts, and he's going to talk about all that stuff. And he's going to talk about his favorite holiday and what else is going on with him. So,
Valentine's Day.
Oh, yeah. Nick, I know Nick loves every holiday. So he lives for holidays. Yeah. So welcome, Nick, to the show. It's been a while.
Yes, thank you. It's good to be back after, it's been a number of years. I think the last time I was on Paranormal Pride was 2018, I believe.
Maybe. Because, because we would have you on, there, and then we would have you on Carl's show when we were on Paranormal Nation Radio. So, hey, Crystal. So I want you to remind everybody why you got started you're one of the biggest paranormal enthusiasts that I've ever met. Explain.
Yeah, where's your jacket?
Yeah, explain how you became so enthusiastic about the paranormal.
So I think how I got so enthusiastic of it, it really has more to do with, how I even got into it, basically, because now I've been involved with it for 21 years, since I was 12 years old. And when I started getting into this kind of subject matter at a young age, it's crazy to think, even with the paranormal shows that we had, back in the late 90s, early 2000s, this was still at a time, even for our era at that time, that not many people were really into believing a lot of the paranormal stuff.
Right.
But I always kept an open mind and was really trying to prove that a lot of this kind of stuff existed. But also I realized that this was kind of something that I realized that it was something I was meant to do. It was something that I enjoyed looking at, and I can't tell you how many times, when I was as a 12-year-old and teenager, that I was always scolded a lot for it, saying you can't talk about this kind of stuff or anything like that, or anything, by other kids, by other teachers, even sometimes from family members. But I never regretted or gave up on it. I kept going with it, even going beyond those warnings. And I think that's what eventually led me to me creating a paranormal club at my high school I went to, at Glenburg South High School here in the Glenview, Chicago area. That club is still running to this day, almost 20 years later.
Wow.
And 2007. So next year will be the club's 20th anniversary. So truly left a legacy behind. And then not long afterwards, I was able to join my first paranormal team by the time I was 17, 18 years old. With the Midnight Paranormal Society, along with also taking one of the few colleges that actually had paranormal classes, Harper Community College. So many of these things is what eventually landed to where I am today. And to this day, I have no regret with what I've done within this field.
So, what classes did you take at the Harper
community colleges teach?
Harper Community College.
So, to be clear, obviously, these classes, they were not like official classes, like you get a degree or anything.
Right.
Although I still say, in my personal opinion, I feel like I had gotten a degree because it still gave me a lot of, more knowledge and education involving the subject. There were different ones. There were ones that were involving, typical haunted locations. There was also stuff involved. There was one class that I took for a short semester that involved UFOs and extraterrestrials. One or two of them, I recall, also had something to do with cryptids. They kind of went all over the place. In fact, the very first class that I took at Harper was led by, I think you guys might know who this is, by the name of Mary Marshall. You guys know who that is? Yeah, she was my very first teacher I had. at that time. And of course, since that day to this, we're still very good friends. We've kept in contact. Obviously she's been to some of the Paracons. She's investigated with us before. So that's another great, unique thing when you're going to these classes, just like what we deal with at our cons. You make connections with people and whatnot. And I think it's fantastic.
When they have the 20-year reunion, are they going to have you come back?
I really hope so, because I got a little funny story about this. This was about 2 years ago now. It was on a day when I was working at the grocery store, and I look over to my left, and, typical, I would just think it would just be another customer walking by who's shopping, but I immediately recognized who this guy was, and he was actually the sponsor for Paranormal Club. Now, I remember he was sponsor for it for like over a decade ago, but turned out he was still involved with it. So I started, so it was like I didn't even have to go to the school, like talk to him or even email him to see if there was some way I can make an appearance at the club.
Yeah.
So he said that they were interested in having me over. And at one point I also mentioned, and this was something that just like almost knocked me off my feet. I said, recently, if you haven't heard, I've actually been running a paranormal network called The Things Network. And he goes like, oh yeah, we know about that. We've watched it a few times. So believe it or not, I don't know if any of these kids are watching, but they might be watching us right now. You never know.
Oh, yeah.
Well, congratulations on the legacy that you have helped to create. That's amazing.
Yeah, it really is. So I did eventually send the guy, an email to see if they could schedule a time for me to come out. Unfortunately, however, though, there were two issues. One was it was getting close to the end of the school year. So I kind of figured, well, school's almost up. Some of these kids are going to be graduating high school, so they're not going to be able to really come back after this. So I figured, why don't we try to start once the fall arrives, and we'll work from that way, like maybe during the Halloween season or so.
Yeah.
Right.
But the other problem was when I tried sending an email to him, he never got back to me. I don't know if it's because maybe he missed it or something like that, but I am hoping that maybe, next year they'll try to invite, because they've even made like an online article about the Paranormal Club, and of course I've been mentioning about it. So ever since I've left high school, that one way or another, they're still keeping an eye on me.
Well, that's good. That it just makes you have a legacy that a lot of people would love to have.
Absolutely. You would think for my club to still exist after 20 years, because unfortunately we all know that every once in a while, like when kids are going to school, sometimes they're part of those families that are like super religious and thinking like all this stuff is devil worship and stuff like that. From what I've heard, not one complaint has ever been given to that club, like from any of those super religious families. So it's allowed this club to survive after all these years, and I'm sure whoever has taken it over long after I finished up, I mean, I'm really hoping one day I'd like to also see how big it was, because when we first started back in 2007, as you could very well imagine, because again, even then this was a different era, a lot of kids and even teachers didn't really take it seriously as much. Only a few kids really kind of came in. And considering that at the time that I started, obviously, was during, again, the October Halloween season. So I think a lot of people back then thought it was kind of a joke because it was close to Halloween and whatnot.
Right.
And as the years went on, the group started to get a bit larger. Of course, as usual, like it's like with any club, they get big and then eventually it only goes down to a few people. So unfortunately, it didn't really end that well when I officially left high school. But from what I've heard, though, is that they have been getting, at least to my understanding, well over 20 to 30 students that come out to this club. And they've kept it the same time ever since, like when I ran it, which they do it every day, every Thursday after school, running from 3:30 to 4:30 p.m. So it doesn't also take a lot of time too for the kids to like get home and whatnot. So it's been a real success, and I'm very and I also got to say, because I'm sure you guys remember this a few years ago too, that for 3 years, not in a row, but during the Halloween season, I was working at Spirit Halloween.
Mm-hmm.
And great job, by the way. I really loved working there. as you can imagine, it is a job that is for high school students. You can be as young as 16 years old to work. So we had a few of those students from my former high school that were working with me at, at the store. And so when I found out which high school they were going to, I usually would ask them. I would normally say, well, here's a question for you. Like, have you ever heard of a club called Paranormal Club? And a lot of times they often would say, yeah, I've heard about it, or I have a friend of mine that goes to it. And I say, well, you might find this a little bit hard to believe, but I am the founder and the original president of Paranormal Club. I started in 2007, and the reactions I get from these kids is incredible. It's like once they hear it, it drives them crazy. It's like to them, they think that they're hanging out with a celebrity. It's like it's that moment where, like, whenever I tell them that I'm the founder and original president, it's like kids want to come up to me and want to get autographs from me. So it's a very special feeling.
Yes, I know that feeling. but, but here in Milton, we started a Milton Paranormal Meetup, which is like Paranormal Club, but for everybody. And we've invited, anybody from the community to come. And sometimes we have 5 people, and sometimes we have 30 people. And so,
but we have a lot of the same people, but we seem to always have somebody new every month.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody That's new good. Will show up. Yeah.
And the biggest thing they want to know is why we started it. And I said, because we were new and we wanted to meet people and find out about the area that we live in. And that's probably part of the reason why you did it too, was to meet people and to spread the paranormal, find out about paranormal from other people as well.
The new people that show up always seem to start off by saying,
you're not going to
I'm here because you're probably not going to believe this. And they'll tell a story and we'll like, yeah. And they'll look at you like, you believe it? Sure. We've actually seen stuff like that. And they're like, oh, wow, I'm at the right place because none of my family or friends or anyone believes. They think I'm nuts.
Yep. We hear
that,
all the
that doesn't surprise me.
Right.
Oh, yeah. We hear all the time, we found our people, is what they say.
Yeah. I often wonder if that's like because now considering that the school year has just started for my former high school, it kind of makes me wonder, especially the newcomers, the freshmen, if they're starting to come out to this club now and starting to maybe ask the same question or say the same thing, that may have found our own people. And, that was also the other intention of why I formed Paranormal Club, was not only just because of the interest, but it was also at a time where, unfortunately for me, I didn't really have that many friends. Typical of high school life, you got the popular kids and whatnot. They wouldn't let you in because you weren't good enough for them or whatnot. So it was like, for me, that's what also kind of inspired me to start my own kind of club. It's kind of like, as I would put it, almost like an alternative to the, again, like you sometimes see in some high school movies, the goth clubs or something like that.
Right.
Or, it's an alternative to the scholastic type.
Yeah.
Clubs.
Yeah, it's like you had your different clubs, your different cliques, your different groups, and I just thought to myself, why shouldn't there be one for like paranormal related stuff and even horror movies to a degree? So it was it was kind of like the alternative to the gothic culture, if you will, and that's where I met a lot of different kids that were interested. And even though it was definitely a tough protocol, I had a lot of fun doing it though, nonetheless.
Yeah. Do you feel like your club kind of pulled in the goth kids and the emo kids because they felt like they were on the outskirts of everything as well?
Not that I remember, like when I was there, because unfortunately, at that time we didn't really have many of those type of kids. I mean, the closest we ever had were some people like that, did dress in black or like listen to metal music and whatnot, but they didn't have like the full appearance basically. But it attracted a few of them. But I do remember the last time when I did try, because if you guys remember, and I know I've yet to have I'm going to try to re-release it at some point. And Tom, of course, who's in the chat, I know has seen it, that I made a documentary film that was called 25 Scariest Movie Moments. And originally, I was actually going to be interviewing some of the kids at my high school at that, which would have been back in 2016. Unfortunately, by the time that we visited, for some reason whatsoever, most of the kids never showed up. But I did meet the kid who was president of the club at that time. But she did have kind of that gothic kind of look, the long black hair and stuff. So there's no doubt in my mind that probably in this day and age, I'm sure, like if there's any gothic or emo kids now, they're probably drawn to that club now. But understandably, I've tried looking to see if there's like been any videos or photographs of the club, like showing activities and whatnot. Yes, Tom. No, it was 3.5 hours long, which I'm trying to cut. I'm trying to cut it down actually to try to get it down to an hour and a half. So it's just because a lot of the footage now that after I've watched is unnecessary. But yeah, like I said though, I'm sure that it would, I'm sure a lot of those type of kids have probably gone to the club ever since. Now that it's kind of become a more popular subject matter for some of these students.
So when
you gotta say hi to Mom, Tom, and Dan and Kitty.
Yep. Hey guys.
And Crystal. Again.
Oh, yep. So now that you're part of, you're what, the co-CEO of Things Network, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I know how you got involved in that, and so do most other people who have heard you speak. What has been your best or your favorite part about being the co-CEO of Things Network?
I think what I love about it the most is, especially when we first started Things Network, bringing everybody together, giving them a chance of like wanting to be like part of an actual podcasting network. Cause, obviously for some of these shows, they've never been on an actual network before. So it was like to give them the experience, but also just the fact that I was able to bring, cause you guys know all too well, I'm a huge believer of Unity, is bringing so many people from all over the world together, and to discuss, not only just the paranormal in general, but just like the ways how it's discussed from different points of views from different countries. And, at this point, from what I know, I know some of the shows, have sadly come and gone, but, every now and then we will get a new show. But it's amazing that in the almost 5 years that we've been around, we have expanded now to nearly 4 continents. And although we almost did get to 5, which might still happen at some point, but again, we don't know for sure. Well, I've actually told Jeremy about this about a year or so ago. We actually almost did get our very first, and so far it's the only paranormal podcast that I've ever came across from any part of South America. So now, obviously, yes, the show is all in Spanish, but I think it would have been really a great change to see, seeing the subject matter being spoken in a different language and whatnot. However, the reason why we still haven't brought his show on is because he does his on Sunday nights, and he also does it around the same time, I think, when Kat Hobson does her show. So
yeah.
I don't know if he's changed the time since, but until there's a change with either Kat's show or his show, probably most likely his show, he still said that he was interested in wanting to join. So it's unfortunate as of right now, but it's not impossible that eventually we may be expanding to our 5th continent soon.
Well, you could always have him just record it.
Yes.
And play it and replay, so I'm just grateful that you guys asked us to be part of Things Network, and we're also Things of Florida now.
Yes.
And I think at one time we were probably Things of Kansas too, but we moved.
Yeah.
But and then are you you're part of Temple of Phoenix Rising Network as well, right?
Correct. Yeah, I know there hasn't been as much that's been going on the network, at least as far as I know. But either way, I'm still part of that network as well.
Mm-hmm. Did you have a paranormal experience that got you started into this, or you were just interested in haunted stuff and then got involved?
So what got me into it was not like, it's not like most investigators was because they had an experience at a young age. It was actually curiosity that brought me into it.
That's same as me.
Yeah, it was the simplest way I could put it, I've said this for every show I've been on, is where, I was, again, a typical 12-year-old, just like surfing through the channels, see what's good on television, whatnot. And this was back, and of course, I'm sure you guys remember this. This was when the Travel Channel only had, paranormal shows on Friday nights at the time. This was long before Ghost Adventures took over. So this was when they were showing different shows, different specials from the late 90s, early 2000s. So, but I come across this show that's called Most Haunted. And I just thought to myself, like, I was like, holy cow, like what is this? And it got my curiosity very quickly. And of course, as you guys know, I was already like watching big time horror movies at that time. So I thought, this looks really creepy, but it also looks pretty fun too. So I sat down, to watch it. And before, it was like I was hooked on it. And it was like, over the years, during my early years, it's like I climbed through the ranks. So like, obviously, like I said, by the time I was 14, I started my paranormal club, but I also had my first investigation, which it was just a part-time investigation, though. It was not like a full night one. And I actually did receive my very first piece of evidence, an EVP, which I still have today. Unfortunately, though, it was used through an old digital recorder, so I can't really transfer it onto a computer, but I still have the recording either way. And then a few years after that, and I know everyone knows the story all too well, but I'll say it anyway. Then a few years later, I had my first ever full night investigation at Waverly Hills Sanatorium in Louisville, Kentucky by the time I was 17 years old. And to this day, even over 15 years later, I still consider that one of my very best investigations.
So do you have anything planned coming up?
Well, it's funny because Tom and I were actually talking on the phone last night. And
really good.
Yeah, we were. Because we were for a couple of weeks, if not almost like a few months. Tom and I were not talking because we had at least for me, I had other things that were going on in my life and stuff like that. But we started talking. The first thing I wanted to talk to him about on the phone was, because it's just a few weeks away now, is we got SilCon that's coming up down in Central Illinois.
Yeah.
And we're already confirmed that we are going to SilCon. So I'm excited to be part of that. But we also are looking at, and this is great from my part, because it's been almost a year since I've even done an investigation. It looks like we have some investigations planned around early October. It was like October. It was either, Tom remind me, it was either October 10th, 11th, or 12th. It was on a Saturday. I just can't remember which day. We actually might be making a return to Ashmore Estates because the Tennessee Wraith Chasers are going to be doing a special investigation event down there. And once we found out the price, although it is kind of expensive, we're like, it's not really that bad of a price. So that kind of gave us it's giving us an opportunity, which not only is it the first time in almost 15 years since I've been to since I've actually investigated. Yeah, that's what I mean. I was there with you guys a few years back.
No, actually, you didn't get to go.
No. It was, you know what? I got that mixed up. Yeah, we had to take Jeff back.
Right.
But then we made a return a few years later with Eric and some of those other people. But it was just more like a daytime tour.
Yeah.
So, but this is going to be the first time actually investigating at night. So we figured this would be an opportunity. It would also be our very first time ever investigating with the Wraith Chasers, which, of course, we become very good friends with them. There's also another place that I am trying to get an investigation going because this may sound partially off topic, but I don't know if you guys have seen that I've been going to this bar recently with some friends of mine in the downtown in an area called Uptown near the downtown Chicago area. It's a place that's called the Green Mill. Now, the Green Mill, just to give you guys a little bit of backstory on it, it's actually one of Chicago's original jazz clubs, and it was one of the clubs. Yeah, it was one of the clubs that indeed notorious Chicago gangster Al Capone did frequent it on a regular basis. Now, the club has been around since 1935. So although before that was built, there was another building that was built beforehand that in 1933, there was actually a fire that occurred in the building. I don't really recall exactly how the fire started. Now, surprisingly, nobody died from it, but the resulting energy has remained from that disaster. There have been a few other notorious gangsters that have come and gone throughout the building, but to this day, it still operates as a jazz club. And I had the opportunity to talk with one of the employees about. She said that she had been working there for almost 40 years, since 1987, and she said that there has not been a day that has gone by where there's some type of activity that occurs in the building. And I was also fortunate enough to have found out that it looks like the place does allow investigations, because there was another paranormal group that was there a few months prior before we started going out to this bar. And they have a video of it on YouTube, so you can check it out for yourselves if you want to see it. But at some point, I am going to try to make a return back to. I'm going to try to make a return back to the Green Mill, talk to the owner, and kind of like Bobby Mackey, the owner of the bar, he doesn't believe in any of this kind of stuff, but yet he still allows the investigations to go on. So at some point, we're going to be investigating also a new location that I haven't investigated before. So got quite a few things coming up over the next couple weeks.
Yeah, we're coming to Illinois on October 17th.
Oh, you guys are? Are you guys coming to the Chicago area or a different part of the state? Or
McPike.
Oh, McPike. Oh, of course. Alton. Yeah.
Yep. Our annual volunteer event with Dara and Caitlin. You know them. And we'll be meeting up with everybody that we know there. And Susan and Mike, so glad you're here. And I'm happy that you guys got to give Dara a hug and say hi to her. So, but yeah, so you're going October 10th to Ashmore. That'll be good. Just make sure that you have some nice warm clothes.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, because I know for a fact by then it's going to be cool. So, the other thing too,
it wasn't the same weekend as ours.
Oh, I know.
The other thing too, I just realized, and I haven't even told Tom this, but you guys remember the suitcase I always carry with the equipment? I actually have to get a new one, because unfortunately the one I've had has finally broke because of age. So I got to go to the hardware store to get another one.
Well, it's always good to upgrade.
Yes, it is. So I'm hoping they have something different, because, it can only last for so long.
Did you ever watch a show? It was probably around 2010, right in there, maybe, if I had to guess.
Mm-hmm.
It was a bunch. It was only on for one season. I forgot who even did it, but there was a bunch of Chicago cops and detectives.
Oh, paranormal.
These guys, they were great. I loved the way they did it.
Oh yeah, they were fantastic.
I think that bar you're talking about, I think that was one of the locations they went to.
I'm sure they did, because they investigated just about almost every haunted location in Chicago.
Yeah.
And I did meet them like once or twice. They were great group of guys.
Yeah.
It was even more amazing that they were also, because they really lived up to their names, because they were actually police officers too.
Yeah. Yeah, and they looked like they had fun doing it. They were kind of serious, but they kind of joked around a little bit.
Yeah, they on season 1, episode 3, Stirring Up the Dead.
Okay.
Was the Green Mill?
That's where I heard of it.
Cocktail lounge.
Yep.
And the thing is Ron, the cop that was on there, I actually have talked to him multiple times. It's just getting him on is because he's still working is so hard.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's still working.
So I talked to him at length multiple times about getting him on the show. So, but yeah, I love.
Yeah, we love that show. I couldn't believe it didn't catch on and take off.
I think.
Yeah, I'm really surprised too, because that was a show that we all loved. Like, especially obviously for us here, because they were from our area, and it was just it was an amazing sight to see something like that. So I just didn't understand. I definitely wish they could have gone on for at least a few more seasons, but
it showed up.
I think it went the route of Ralph Sarchie. To be honest,
yeah.
I think that there was way too much honesty, and I don't. They didn't want to exaggerate, because there's a lot of exaggeration in the paranormal.
I'm not going to lie, but like during my early years, there were times that I was kind of exaggerating myself because that's what I was being taught. But obviously, as I got older, I started realizing, I don't need to go that far or with that kind of behavior. So I know better to do so. In fact, and I've been meaning to release this. I know I sent some screenshots a few months ago about this, but that investigation that I mentioned about with Waverly a few months ago, and I couldn't believe this because my dad was going through some old tapes, just home video tapes of like our upbringing and childhood and whatnot.
Yeah.
And he came across the cassette tape because like when we went to Waverly Hills back in 2010, I was fortunate enough to have recorded a vast majority of the investigation course. Obviously, back in 2010, we didn't really have as much live streaming as we do now. So
Right.
I was using an old-fashioned video camera, which was like from the late 80s, early 90s, which you had to put the little cassette tape in. But it did have night vision on it, fortunately.
Yes, I have one of them.
Yeah, so, but of course, even by 2010, nobody was really using them anymore. So, except for one day, I only saw like just a few minutes of that footage, like probably only about 10% of what was probably about an hour and a half of footage. So, but because again, since no one was using those tapes anymore, that tape remained for the most part unseen for many years. Like to me, for the longest time, I was actually calling it the Lost Paranormal tape. So, but that 15 years, that search was finally put to an end because my dad, he was able to use this program or like this machine to transfer and digitize footage.
Yep.
So I was able to get a copy of that footage. He put one on his on one laptop. I put it on mine here. And so it was like as if I was like the classic line. It was like I was a kid in a candy shop, or it was almost like I was a kid waiting to get my birthday or Christmas gift. I was so excited to finally see this footage. So I sat down and I watched it. Now, to be clear, I already knew from the very start I was not expecting myself to capture, the Holy Grail. I didn't even think I was going to capture anything at all for the most part. Mm-hmm. And I will admit, and at some point again, I'll have the footage release, but I will just say that I didn't capture anything extraordinary, but there are some things that I did capture that are like, there were some things I was able to debunk, but there were some other things that has kind of questioned me about some certain things that I thought, that looks pretty interesting. I already wrote notes on it. So what I'm probably going to do eventually when I do release the footage for anybody that wants to, like I said, it's about an hour and 20 minutes of footage. So I'm going to release it unedited. But my goal is for anyone who wants to check it out and see the parts that I put notes on to see if either you can debunk it, or if there's something that maybe I may have missed, or maybe there is something that you guys may know better than I am. I guess in this way, I'm kind of letting everybody be the judge on it.
Mm-hmm. That's the best way to go. Don't tell them what to see. You let them see what they're going to see. And then you find out what else was there that, sometimes we're not all paying attention to the same thing at the same time.
Not only just by seeing, also listening too, if someone's listening to headphones or something, because like I have my computer connected to an HDMI and had it on the big screen. So even though I had it loud enough, that doesn't mean that I may have missed hearing a voice or something like that. So unlike a lot of the typical shows and groups where sometimes they point out, I'm kind of letting people like decide on their own to see what they think is kind of unexplained and whatnot. And I will admit in part of the video, because again, I was 17 at the time, but there were times I was exaggerating a little bit, and I'm ashamed to admit, but I also said at one point the D word, demon.
Oh no!
But again, you were young, and what you would say is
you should automatically got a show.
You know what though? You know what Frank Bennett would say? He would say, "Well, you were just young and dumb then." And
yes, I was.
And you've learned. So, it's always good to quote somebody that you know what they're going to say. But the fact is that you've learned a lot. I mean, just the stuff that I've learned in the last 10 years versus what, what I've learned over the last 50 years. has been amazing in the paranormal. And what you believed 20 years ago is probably a little bit different than what you believe now.
Yes. So like when I look at that footage now, I mean, whether I captured something extraordinary or not, especially from a 17-year-old's point of view, which is not very, especially was not very common back then. I mean, it just really goes to show, like, even as at that age, that I was able to still take part in something like this. And it's a compelling piece of footage. I think honestly, it's like this is just my personal opinion, but to me, I think it's kind of like a piece of footage that should probably be almost like the most perfect example for a first time ghost hunter, especially if they're still in their teenage years. And I think my footage really kind of gives that subject matter.
Well, I think it'd be interesting to see and think about it from the standpoint of a 17-year-old, and then think about it from a standpoint of now. Whoever it is watching it now, what do you know now that's different than what you knew back then? And I think that would really open their eyes to how much they've actually learned and what's changed in the paranormal in just, let's be honest, it's been just a really truly a short amount of time.
Yeah, because well over a decade afterwards, I did have the opportunity of going back to Waverly Hills in 2021, which I was actually able to find the very same spot that I took that famous picture of myself standing with the video camera at the death tunnel, which clearly not much of it has changed since the last time I was there. But just walking through the building was not only just bringing back the memories from when I first went there, but it was also, I actually got a little bit emotional because I was also amazed by how much restoration work has been done with the building since the last time I was there. Because when I went back in 2010, the building at that time, first off, still had no windows that were in place. A lot of the hallways was, and the rooms were dirty. They were covered in dust and grime. Some of the staircases were inaccessible. Like they were literally broken. Like one step and you'd be stepping into space, literally. So now versus back in 2021, seeing all the staircases fixed up or replaced and the entire building cleaned out and all the windows put in, it's like, I mean, I literally had to stop and think for a minute because it was just like, am I really experiencing this, or have I somehow stepped back in time to like the time I was there? It was just such a mixture of different things. So it wasn't even just the paranormal side of it. It was just like, I'm sure I'm probably not the first to say this, but I guess I really do feel some kind of connection with the building in some way, shape, or form.
Mm-hmm.
We understand. We've watched McPike Mansion change.
Oh my gosh.
From when we saw it on TV the very first time in the 1990s to now, to where you can get into the first floor and see, we don't have to set up tents anymore for the gift shop. Now. Yeah, we can go inside now, and it's no longer considered condemned.
Yeah, we can't wait to see it.
Yeah, we can't. Every time we go back now, we're excited to see what's different.
That's great.
Last year, we actually slept in the house for the first.
Hang on 1 second. Mom, I'm on a show right now. Sorry, my mom was calling me. She was taking the dog out for a walk.
Well, at least she's taking the dog out for a walk and not making you do it.
But exactly. Just think about the equipment that you had the first time you went there when you were 17. What did you have? Just a camera, right?
Well, not just the camera. You'd be surprised with the amount of equipment. I mean, I still didn't have that much compared to what I have now, but I was fortunate because, I had the equipment that was pretty much available for me at the time. Because, you see things like, like with a REM pod, thermal camera, that stuff was like back then, like over $1,000.
So, yeah.
It was, even at that time I was working for a bit, even with what I made was not enough for me to purchase it. But I was fortunate enough to get a EMF meter, of course, like I said, a digital recorder. I had a pendulum, crystal, laser thermometer. I did have the laser trip alarm system, but of course, obviously, there was nowhere to really, plug it into anywhere. And finally, there was and I also had dowsing rods. So it was quite the amount of stuff. It may have not been compared to a lot of the stuff, but the other cool part was it was also a lot of the original stuff when you the old fashioned type of stuff, which when you really think about it too, was also much cheaper than the modern day stuff. So with what I had, I was pretty much all ready to go, whether I knew it or not. So,
hey, have you picked up a FLIR camera yet?
I actually do have a FLIR camera, not the actual camera itself. Right. I mean, I am saving up. Yeah, I got the one that you can connect to your phone. So yes.
Oh yeah,
yeah. The one that's about 179.
I think those would be. I think those are good on outdoor, places like graveyards and somewhere you're outside.
It definitely would be great.
I
would say they also work great for cryptid hunts too. If you're searching for Bigfoot or something like that. The only issue I had with the FLIR camera, and I'm sure I'm probably not because I have my phone right here. I'm sure I'm not going to have the same issue with this phone case, but the phone case that I had at that time, I actually had to remove the case so the FLIR camera could actually fit. So there was a downside. It worked great? Don't get me wrong. But it was also at times kind of like a pitiful mistake, leaving your phone completely exposed.
Yeah. Right, considering now that they're all glass.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the phone cases are just thick enough to cause a problem with some of the different things that you can plug into your phones now. So I saw that with there was a thing I could sit my phone in to charge, and it wouldn't reach the charge.
Yeah.
So believe me, I understand that pain.
Yeah. Thankfully, I never dropped it once, so I was fortunate enough. So I just couldn't use it very often until recently because, again, I didn't want to risk breaking my phone.
Yeah. That's when you wish there was an adapter you could put on there to extend the USB-C.
Yes. So, which that would be even better than trying to plug it into the phone completely.
Yeah.
So how many cryptid hunts have you been on?
So I've been on a few of them.
Where at?
So the first ever one that I ever did was, and of course it's my favorite, was Point Pleasant, West Virginia, where I also went to the Mothman Festival almost 10 years ago now, which was perfect too, because that was on the 50th anniversary of the original Mothman sightings that occurred back in the 60s. We actually did have the opportunity to investigate some of the TNT bunkers, which a word of advice, because I don't know if you guys have been to Point Pleasant, be careful which TNT bunkers you go to, because believe it or not, some of those bunkers still actually contain explosives from World War II. And even though it's been over 80 years, they still can detonate. So you got to be careful when you go to those ones. But yeah, and that's another one I'll get to in just a sec. So yeah, we investigated the Mothman. Didn't really have any type of experience other than we kind of did feel as if something was kind of staring from us, directly on top of us from one of the bunkers. I mean, if you want to call it a Mothman encounter, so be it. But that was pretty much all I had. And yes, Tom also mentioned about, and this is a type of cryptid that is not really as popular compared. We also investigated something called, if you guys have ever heard the melon heads before.
No.
So the melon heads, first off, I'll say this, funny name, but the story behind it is actually pretty terrifying. They are described as humanoid beings with large bulbous heads that occasionally emerge from their hiding places to attack people. And how it kind of all started with the story of it was, there are so many different variations about the melon heads that there's, it's just like any urban legends, but two of them, however, stand out the most. Both of them, it started in Kirtland, Ohio, and both of them star a mysterious doctor by the name of Dr. Crow, or sometimes nicknamed Dr. Melonhead. And in one version, he was working for the government and was exposed to a lot of radiation, and he was working during the late 1800s Civil War or early 1900s, or even during World War I or II. And his family, his kids, again, being exposed to this radiation, they were all born mutated. His wife became very ill the government did a cover up, gave them this nice, open area in the woods in Chardon and said, hey, please keep quiet about this. Now, the second version is a little bit more sinister, but it's also the most notorious of the two. Dr. Crow, again, but this time he was working at an orphanage or a hospital, and he was experimenting on kids, primarily who had hydrocephalus, which is, I'm sure you guys know, water in the brain.
Yeah.
And you have to remember, and it's sad to even think this, that, unlike today where we have orphanages and foster homes where, CPS usually, or somebody usually comes in to check in to make sure that these kids are living in good condition. Well, back then they didn't have that. So nobody knew what was going on, with these kids that were being sent to this orphanage or hospital or whatnot. And I mean, what he was experimenting on these kids, vicious experiments, atrocities. And he would end up creating a bunch or a tribe, if you will, of these kids that became, feral, almost, razor sharp teeth and whatnot. And the story usually goes that at some point, not only had some of the kids died, but it got to a point where these kids were injected with so much more of this fluid that they barely looked even human anymore. And so they decided that enough was enough. So they finally decided to fight back, and they killed Dr. Crow. And supposedly they cut him up and put him in different parts of the building. Supposedly also, too, they burned down the orphanage, too, to try to destroy any type of evidence for it, but really not sure, really don't know for sure if the doctor actually survived or not. But what we do know is, like I said, they burned it down. And then shortly after that, they fled off into the woods. And since that day, supposedly they still remain in these woods. And you're thinking, well, if they're kids, how could they be still alive today? Well, they supposedly said that they're descendants of these original creatures, and they're the results of cannibalism and inbreeding. But they're not just restricted to just Ohio, though, because as time went on, some of these deformed individuals decided to leave the area just so they could get away from there. And as a result, not only have we still been getting sightings and reports of these creatures in Ohio to this day, but we've also started getting reports and sightings of these creatures from the 1940s on in Michigan, Florida, Maine, North Carolina, and Connecticut especially. So now the typical melonhead description is said to be smallish, pale, about 3 to 4 feet tall, large-headed, hairless individual, usually said to make animalistic type sounds in order to communicate with each other. They usually come out at night. They have dark or glowing red eyes, like I said, razor sharp teeth, biped 2 legs, dirty clothes or stained clothes, usually stained with blood or other substances. A better way to describe them, I think they probably would look a lot more like what we would think aliens look like. And it's said that they like to watch cars go by. They saw them first, watching them first. Chasing or approaching a melonhead usually will cause them to run in both cases. But at the same time, many people have been chased out of those woods a lot, allegedly by melonheads, although most people have said they never actually have seen a melonhead chasing them. What gets them out to the woods, investigate, and explore is what they think is a melonhead. But what chases them out of the car is anyone's guess. So
it sounds like the hills have eyes.
You know what? It's funny you mentioned it. I think they actually based The Hills Have Eyes from the Melonhead legend, because it pretty much is the legend. The only difference is in The Hills Have Eyes, it takes place in a desert instead of the woods.
Yeah.
And I think the scariest thing about these creatures, supposedly, is the fact that if you saw one of these creatures, unlike all the other cryptids like Bigfoot or Mothman or whatnot, like now that you guys know the backstory, you can tell that even with their horrific deformities, that they weren't, sorry, someone's calling me, they weren't really monsters to begin with. So again, if you saw one of them, I think even under their deformities, you would tell that at some point, they were human and were driven underground in cannibalism and inbreeding.
Yeah, that, like I said, when I heard all that, has anybody found any definitive history related to any of the hospital, possibly the real doctor? anything like that, or has it always just been legend?
The only thing that comes close to the legend, like the true story, is that there is a small graveyard that is in the Kirtland, Ohio area in the woods. And supposedly there is a doctor or somebody that has the last name of Crow. Now, we don't know for sure if that was actually Dr. Melonhead in this case. It may have just been coincidence that his last name, but there are several children that were buried in that same cemetery. So we do know there was some type of building that once existed throughout that area. And yeah, like what I was about to get to when we went over there, I'm not going to lie. Like when we went during the day. We didn't have time to check it out at night because that was back in 2020. That was after we met with Mike Ricksecker when we were on our way home from visiting him. And Kirtland, because we were close to the Cleveland area, it was kind of almost like along the way home. So we got there. I have to admit, it was kind of a bit creepy even during the day because I noticed how incredibly quiet the woods were. Now, there were a few farmhouses that were scattered about, and at first I thought to myself, I can't imagine like how these people have to live if these creatures supposedly exist. Mm-hmm. But also, we had to be careful too, because let's face it, this was also backwoods territory. So we also had to be careful.
Property, all that,
exactly. We didn't want any farmers meeting us up there with a shotgun or anything like that. But unfortunately, the investigation kind of got cut short, not because of that, but in addition to where the Melonheads are supposedly said to lurk, there is also a bridge that goes over a creek, which is also has a legend of its own. It's your typical crybaby bridge.
Oh.
So there was kind of two stories of legends, if you will, that we were going to investigate. But the problem was when we got there, we saw the entire section was closed off. There was a gate that said it was closed off. We had no idea why the reason it was. My first thought was maybe it was hold on one second. I'm terribly sorry about this. Hey, can I call you back in just a little bit? I'm on a show right now. Okay. I'll talk to you later. Bye. Sorry, they were calling me repeatedly.
Well, they felt like it was really important.
Yeah. No, they said it was fine. But yeah, we saw the entire area was gated off. Now, my only assumption was maybe it was because of all the investigators, the thrill seekers, legend trippers that were always cut. So maybe it was just that classic moment where the locals just had enough. And they just blocked it off. Well, it turned out that was not the case at all. It turned out.
Yeah, I was going to say, that's weird.
Yeah, well, it turned out in reality, and I found this out from a YouTuber who was going through that same area, that the bridge was actually washed away a few months prior before he showed up. So they closed it more for safety reasons because there was no bridge. So that kind of forced us to cut the investigation short. But I'm not going to lie, that area was still a relatively eerie, wooded area, just being how quiet it is. But I have to admit, and I told Tom about this, because I told you, they're not just restricted to Kirtland, they're seen in a few other states. There is one area that there's no bridge at all, so we shouldn't have any issue. It is located, it's one of the Melonheads territories I think it's in Trumbull, Connecticut. And there's a road that runs through the woods. For most people, like if you didn't know the legend, it's simply just called Velvet Street. But to the locals, it's called Dracula Drive. And, the bridge is back open now. Well, you know what that means, Tom. We're going to have to take a visit back over there. But
road trip.
Yeah, but
you probably have to go in May when you guys go to the jail.
Oh, yeah, definitely. But Dracula Drive is said to be a notorious mythical road. And they also say, again, because of its eerie atmosphere, that's where the name Dracula Drives come from. And supposedly people said they've seen the Melonheads by the side of the road. Their Monsters and Mysteries in America did a segment on the Melonheads where they interviewed someone who actually went with his friends on one particular night. They saw a dead deer by the side of the road. They saw some movement, but his friends were starting to get kind of freaked out. So they decided to leave. But then a few nights later, he decided to drive to Dracula Drive himself. And he saw the same dead deer that was on the side of the road. He saw some movement. And then the next thing he knew, he saw this figure, probably about 4 feet tall or so. The first thing he noticed was its enlarged head. And before you know it, the creature saw him and actually started giving chase. And he he was scared for his life. Like, he actually said he was expecting a hand to like grab onto his shoulder, but fortunately he was able to jump in the car and speed away. But he said he has stayed away from Dracula Drive since then. But in his case, they do exist out there. They're not to be trusted. And even though that they may be deformed humans, they're not going to put on a freak show or anything for you or anything like that. They apparently, as the legend goes, they occasionally prey upon humans who wander into their territory.
I wonder if Ken Gerhardt has ever investigated these.
There's been a few investigations from them, but I haven't really seen a lot of the like I said, there's not as many reports like compared to some of the other cryptids. There was supposedly like a high school girl that supposedly she and her friends drove on Dracula Drive back in the 80s, and they got out of the car, they walked down the street for a little bit, and then all of a sudden they said the headlights started flashing like crazy, and then the car actually started moving like from side to side. They had no idea what was going on, but when the car went past them, supposedly they said they could see a cluster of small, large-headed, deformed beings in the car, apparently. So I don't know if this means they actually know how to drive, but they actually gain access to the car.
That makes me wonder if it's not alien type.
Yeah.
Because of the fact that if these girls were in a car and their car started acting up, that makes me think that it would be something that either can control the electronics in the car or the mechanics, things like that.
The only other report I can remember, like I said, Tom, they call it Dracula Drive because not only just association with the Melonheads, but it was just due to its isolated, eerie atmosphere. Because there's like the other thing they also say, and this is again your classic area too, like especially when it comes to these creatures, but people have have said they sometimes will see singular severed deer legs by the side of the road. Lone bikers, hikers, joggers, hunters, and even drivers have occasionally disappeared with almost no trace of them ever being found, except for maybe a bike, backpack, or even a car. But the only other reports I could think of from the Melonheads encounters was there was one guy who, when he was 10 years old, who lived along the banks of this forest not far from Dracula Drive, or one of the other roads that supposedly, because again, there's more than one road. There's like about, I guess, 8 or 9 different spots throughout the area of Connecticut where the Melonheads supposedly lurk. And he said when he was about 10 years old, he heard some ruckus that was going on outside. So he went outside to the backyard, obviously at night, to investigate. And what he found his dog laying on the ground bleeding, fortunately still alive. It wasn't killed. But when he looked up, he saw a strange being with basically pale skin and a large head. When the creature saw him, it ran off into the woods. The next day, he actually did follow the tracks, which he said they looked very, very human looking, but they mysteriously stopped at a nearby creek. So could have jumped or may have actually went into the creek, or like they sometimes say with Bigfoot reports, like where they're saying they're extraterrestrial. It's hard to really say. There was also I got 2 more to throw on. I'm sorry. There was also a story about supposedly there was a construction company that was either working on Velvet Street or also one of the other streets is called Sawmill Street, I think. And they were repaving the road. And this was during the height of the daylight. So they started hearing some weird noises in the woods, which sounded like people were talking in the woods, but they could not see anybody. They were well aware about the story of the Melonheads, but even hearing the noises that they heard off in the woods was too much for them. 2 of the workers refused to ever work at that road after dark, and one other construction worker refused to come back to the road at all. And finally there was one other report of somebody who claimed he saw a couple of deformed beings that were rummaging through the bushes and whatnot. So again, not as big with with some of the other cryptids, but the Melonheads in some way have had their own share of reports. In fact, there's even been a few low budget movies that have been made on them, not surprisingly.
Well, yeah, that I would have to say that is a I have to go with a rare cryptid account for us anyway. I've never heard of them. So I have heard of the little green men
Yep.
in Carolina. I've heard about them. I forgot what they were called, but I've heard about them. I've heard about the blue people of West Virginia, and
Yep.
that's because of silver in the silver in the water.
Right.
And so that makes sense. I mean, I don't know how many of those people still exist, but when you were talking about the melonheads, I would think that they would be still living possibly in areas within West Virginia. There is a lot of rural area there that most people have no clue how to even get to.
That wouldn't be surprised, considering also Ohio borders right up to West Virginia. Mm-hmm. So it would be certainly not out of the question that some of these creatures have probably made their home in West Virginia. And like I said, even though probably the original creatures, if you will, have long died, there's been all these descendants of them. And even the ones in other states have their own origins and legends, like the ones in Connecticut. They also supposedly, in their case, I mean, there is a story involving an asylum, too, that supposedly burned down in the fall of 1960, although there never was an asylum as far as historical records go. But they also say that the Melonheads of Connecticut are descendants of a colonial-era family that was banned from Salem, Massachusetts, of course, from because of accusations of witchcraft. And like some of these other stories, their appearance as the result of inbreeding and cannibalism.
Yeah, like I said, there's got to be some facts somewhere to corroborate some of these stories. I mean, even with Bigfoot, there's some facts, maybe not facts as far as what they are, but some kind of origin story that somebody can base in fact. Just like our paranormal stories, they're a lot of them are based in history. And like I would always tell people about the Sally house, there is no proof of any Sally, zero.
Right.
And the two that I found were not related to the house at all that we know of. So when you think about, every legend has some truth to it, it's finding what that truth is.
Exactly. And I think that's kind of like, it kind of goes back to with what I was saying before about how there's that small cemetery in Kirtland that, ironically enough, there is someone by the last name of Crow that is buried in that cemetery along with several kids around. So you have to think that that's got to be partially the truth right in front of you. Now, unfortunately, we never did get to find the cemetery because I guess it was probably on the other side of the bridge. But again, we didn't have access to it at that time. So, like I said, I'm hoping one day that we actually spoke with, I forgot what his name was. He was at the Mothman Festival 10 years ago. He used to be on a lot of the cryptid shows. He was like on Monster Quest, Monsters and Mysteries in America. I just can't remember his name.
Not Dave Spinks, is it?
Sorry, who?
Dave Spinks?
I don't think it was him. Yeah, I just can't remember. I'm sure it'll come back to me at some point.
Yeah.
I just can't think of, I could see his face. I just can't remember his name. But he told me at one point that they actually did have a group that did try to go search for these creatures. And he told me he was going to try to get a hold of them for me so I could try to investigate whenever I came back out to Ohio. But of course, the plans never materialized. But I don't know if that group is still in existence today. But there was a group that did go out and try to search for evidence on them.
Well, that's an amazing story. And I'd like to thank you so much for sharing your stories with us tonight. Can you tell everybody where they can find you?
So you can find me basically just on Facebook and YouTube. I'm actually working. I know we didn't have much time to talk about this. I've actually been getting back to work on my audiobook series. So I actually have a few upcoming projects that I would like to eventually get to work on, which of course, Denise, you remember you did one of those stories. I would like to get you, Jeremy, who's in the chat, and Tom back. But I'm dealing with a few other projects right now in the moment. But yeah, you can just find me up. I'm sorry.
Just reach out.
Yeah, definitely. yeah, you can just find me on Facebook and YouTube. And of course, obviously, you can find me also on the Official Things Network page, which, as a reminder, we're about to approach our 5th year anniversary, which I'm very proud of. We made it to 5 years entirely. So it's didn't think we were going to make it this far, but we did. So I think we've earned ourselves a pat on the back for it. So, but I appreciate you guys having me on. This has been great.
Well, thank you so much for coming on. I hope everybody will join us next Monday night at 7 p.m. Central for the Paranormal Pride. You can find us here on Things Network, on the Bill of Rights Network, Temple of Phoenix Rising Entertainment Facebook pages, the Paranormal Pride Facebook page, as well as my LinkedIn. And you can find us on Dark Realm TV in replay. So make sure you check all of those places out. And if you guys have any questions or have any ideas of any good guests that you guys would like for me to interview, let me know. I'd love to hear about them. So thank you guys and have a great night. Good night.